To me, Roman aqueducts are a true marvel. You turn a tap and clean water arrives instantly, at whatever pressure your building was designed for, without you ever thinking about elevation, gravity, or the miles of pipe standing between you and a reservoir you have probably never seen. Now picture solving that same problem 2,000 years ago across hills, valleys, and entire mountain ranges, using nothing but stone, lead, and a fanatical obsession with slope. Because the smallest miscalculation over 50 miles of terrain would mean the water simply stopped moving. That is not an exaggeration. It is roughly what the Roman aqueduct system actually was, and the engineering behind it was precise enough that modern surveyors studying the surviving channels still find it genuinely difficult to improve on, given the tools available at the time. The city of Rome alone was eventually served by 11 separate aqueducts, the first of which, the Aqua Appia, was completed in 312 BCE under the direction of a Roman official named Appius Claudius Caecus, the same official who broke ground on the Via Appia that same year, treating clean water and a paved road out of the city as two halves of the same infrastructure problem. Altogether, the aqueducts feeding Rome ran for hundreds of miles of channel, and contrary to the popular image of endless stone arches marching across the countryside, the vast majority of that distance ran underground in covered stone or lead-lined channels called a spacus, cut into hillsides or buried beneath fields. Engineers only built the dramatic elevated arcades where the land itself demanded it, when a valley was too low to route the channel underground without losing the gradient entirely. That gradient is where the real engineering lived. Roman surveyors had to maintain a continuous, gentle, downward slope over enormous distances, using nothing but sighting instruments and careful fieldwork, because water, moving by gravity alone, has no tolerance for a route that occasionally slopes the wrong way. The Aqua Claudia, completed in 52 CE, maintained a mean gradient of roughly 1 meter of drop for every 258 meters of horizontal distance, sustained consistently across dozens of miles of hostile, uncooperative terrain. The aqueduct feeding the city of Nimes, in what is now southern France, is an even more extreme case. Over its full 50-kilometer route, the channel dropped an average of only about 24 centimeters per kilometer, and where it crossed the Gard River on the structure now known as the Pont du Gard, the water channel running along the very top tier of the bridge dropped a total of just 2.5 centimeters over its entire 275-meter length. That is a level of precision that would be difficult to guarantee today with a laser level and a truck full of modern surveying equipment, let alone with a wooden sighting tool and an assistant standing on a distant hillside holding a marked pole. Where a valley was too deep or too wide to bridge economically, Roman engineers used a different trick entirely, called an inverted siphon. Instead of carrying the channel across on arches, they ran sealed lead pipes down one side of the valley, across the bottom, and back up the other side, relying on the simple physical fact that water under pressure will rise again to nearly the height it started from. It is the same basic principle behind a modern siphon hose, scaled up to move an entire city's water supply through a river valley without a single moving part. None of this ran itself. In 97 CE, an administrator and military engineer named Sextus Julius Frontinus was appointed Curator Aquarum, the water commissioner responsible for the entire aqueduct system feeding Rome, and he took the job seriously enough to write a detailed technical and administrative account of it called De Aqueductu. Frontinus documented the exact capacity of each aqueduct in a standardized unit called the quinaria, and used those measurements to catch something that had apparently been happening for years: private landowners illegally tapping into the public channels to steal water for their own farms and gardens, quietly shrinking the supply that was supposed to reach the city. It is one of the earliest detailed examples of a government official using systematic measurement rather than guesswork to audit a piece of public infrastructure. The sheer volume involved was genuinely large by ancient standards. At full theoretical capacity, the combined aqueducts could deliver something in the range of 700 litres of water per person per day for Rome's population, though that figure assumes every channel running clean, unobstructed, and undiminished by theft, which was rarely the case in practice. The historian Christa Brun, working from more conservative assumptions about sedimentation, maintenance closures, and illegal tapping, estimated a more realistic figure closer to 67 litres per person per day, reaching the average resident, still comfortably above the 50 litres per day the United Nations considers a basic minimum for modern water security, even if it falls well short of the roughly 560 litres per person the average American used daily by the mid-1970s. All of that water, though, was moving through a material Rome used constantly and had no real way to test for safety: lead. Distribution pipes throughout the city were commonly made from lead sheets rolled into tubes and soldered along the seam. And in 2014, a researcher named Hugo Delile, working at the University of Lyon, published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences analyzing lead isotopes preserved in sediment cores pulled from the Tiber River and from the harbour basin at Portus. The isotope signatures in that sediment allowed Delile's team to estimate that water moving through Rome's distribution network carried up to 100 times more lead than the natural spring water feeding the aqueducts in the first place, meaning the delivery system itself was the primary source of contamination. That finding sits inside a much larger pattern. In January of 2025, a researcher named Joseph McConnell at the Desert Research Institute published a study in the same journal analyzing lead concentrations preserved in Arctic ice cores, stretching from around 500 BCE to 600 CE. Because lead pollution drifts through the atmosphere and settles into ice sheets far from its source, McConnell's team was able to reconstruct continent-wide atmospheric lead levels tied to Roman-era mining and silver smelting, the same industrial activity that supplied the empire's coinage, and to estimate that the resulting exposure was large enough to measurably lower average cognitive function across the population exposed to it, with some researchers proposing the exposure may even have left the population more vulnerable to the disease outbreaks that followed. So the aqueducts represent a strange kind of engineering achievement, genuinely brilliant in its command of gravity, gradient, and large-scale coordinated construction, and simultaneously delivering a slow, invisible harm through the very pipes that made the whole system function, using a material nobody at the time had any way to identify as dangerous. What is hard to dispute is the durability of the physical structures themselves. Sections of the Pont du Gard still stand essentially intact, and the Roman aqueduct at Segovia in modern Spain carried water into the city using nothing but its original stone arches until well into the 20th century, roughly 1900 years after it was built, a maintenance record most modern infrastructure projects are never expected to be judged against. The next time water arrives instantly from a tap, and you don't think twice about it, it is worth remembering that someone once measured a slope by eye across 50 miles of hostile terrain and got it accurate to within a few centimetres, built a bridge to carry it across a river gorge almost as an afterthought, and audited the whole system for theft using nothing but careful arithmetic, all while unknowingly poisoning the water, one lead pipe at a time.